All right, everyone, welcome. Happy Saturday. I so lost in my own thoughts, I didn't even have my microphone hooked up. I did it just now in a flurry. Hope everyone's doing good today. It is Saturday, and we have stuff to go over. I did spent a little bit of time playing, finishing my game of Humankind last night. I won. It's a 600 turn game. I won by like 400 or 500 victory points or whatever, so that was pretty good. Normally, I will continue those games and just continue to play just to do it, but I stopped it, started a new game, and I'm doing okay. I've eliminated my nearest competitor, and I am currently the Assyrians dealing with a independent, aggressive empire, and they're kind of annoying. So it's going okay that way. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Looking for jobs, as you guys may have heard. Applied to gravity payments. I applied to a Google job. Not expecting much from that because I'm years out of practice of my programming. And the Sunrise Movement as well. Gravity payments said for the QA job I applied for that they weren't interested at this time, which I understand. I don't really have any QA experience, but I threw it in there because it's gravity payments. But yeah, so that's what is going on with me. Tomorrow, we'll be going over to my parents' house. They've got a nice gazebo outside where we spend our time, so it's safe. She's gonna cook food, we'll play cards or something like that. So that'll be nice. And then I get to break to my parents, yes, that I'm losing my job in January. So that's gonna be a thing. Yeah, so hope everyone's doing okay. Anyone do anything interesting on Saturday or have any great news to help counteract the shit slide that is my life currently? Anything? Anybody? All right. So let's I've got two articles here on this, and this is kind of interesting. And when we talk about my environmental policies and stuff like this, I kind of have something like this similar to this going on, but I definitely approach it a little bit differently. But let's see what they have to say about what's happening in China here. Okay, this one is from 2016. So this is a little bit dated. What is this one? This is from 2017. Huh. Okay, I didn't notice that. All right, so I'm wondering where they are now. Okay, we'll read these. This is 2013. Holy crap in a box. All right, so these are really dated, so just keep this in mind. And at some point, I'll go ahead and do some research on this because I'm curious where these are ending up. I know we read an article a few weeks ago looking at China has these giant skyscrapers and they're just fucking empty. Just empty. So, that will be part of it. And we can kind of get into how, they may have improved the way they were doing it and the issues that they may be encountering as far as this is concerned. Again, 2013, so super dated, but at least we can get some back information on what they are planning on doing. All right, this is New York Times. This is 26. Okay. No, here it is, 2013. I can't read. 16 here, that fooled me. Okay, China's great uprooting, moving 250 million into cities. Beijing. China is pushing ahead with a sweeping plan to move 250 million rural residents into newly constructed towns and cities over the next dozen years. A transformative event that could set off a new wave of growth or saddle the country with problems for generations to come. Government, often by fiat, is replacing small rural homes with high-rises, paving over vast swaths of farmland and drastically altering the lives of rural dwellers. So large is the scale that the number of brand new Chinese city dwellers will approach the total urban population of the United States, in a country already bursting with megacities. This will decisively change the character of China, where the Communist Party insisted for decades that most peasants, even those working in the cities, remain tied to their tiny plots of land to ensure political and economic stability. Now, the party has shifted priorities, mainly to find a new source of growth for a slowing economy that depends increasingly on a consuming class of city dwellers. Okay, the shift is occurring so quickly and the potential costs are so high that some fear rural China is once again the site of radical social engineering. Over the past decades, the Communist Party has flip-flopped on peasants' right to use land, giving small plots to farm during 1950s land reform, collectivizing a few years later, restoring rights at the start of the reform era, and now trying to obliterate small landholders. Across China, bulldozers are leveling villages that date to long ago dynasties. Towers now sprout skyward from dusty plains and verdant hillsides. New urban schools and hospitals offer modern services, but often at the expense of the torn down temples and open air theaters of the countryside. Yeah, and when I talk about a resource-based economy and how to implement it and stuff like this, this is kind of the historical thing that typically that keeps coming to mind, especially like when it comes to things like historical temples and open air theaters that have historical significance. Yeah, tearing those down, if we can avoid it, is a good thing. Or if we can move them somewhere, I mean, it is possible to do that in some cases. Or build your city so that we don't have to do that. Build it in a place where you don't have to tear all these things down. Because they're great for history, at least for the time being. It's a new world for us in the city, said Tian Wei, 43, a former wheat farmer in the northern province of Hebei, who now works as a night watchman at a factory. All my life I've worked with my hands in the fields. Do I have the educational level to keep up with the city people? China has long been home to both some of the world's tiniest villages and its most congested, polluted examples of urban sprawl. The ultimate goal of the government's modernization plan is to fully integrate 70% of the country's population, or roughly 900 million people, into city living by 2025. Currently, only half that number are. Investing in a little bit of China, are you now? Well, it's definitely going to be a growing economy. I mean, it's still going to be. I mean, the benefit to China being an authoritarian regime is that when they decide to do something, that they do it, much like this, right? And getting rid of crypto and all the other things. So again, this one goes from 2013. So I'll be curious to see how well they're doing on this. You know, when I think about a resource-based economy, this is something that I think of as well, because a part of the issue with rural living is a lot of them tend to be conservative. So how do we get rid of conservatism as a phenomenon? We can take some of these areas where, you know, people are growing farms, and make them urban, and then not have to worry about some of that. There's always going to be people who want to live out in, you know, the forest and stuff like that, that you can't quite get rid of, but they'll also need access to the many amenities that the cities have. So they won't be that far out. So what are you investing in China? The building friend. Oh, an index fund. Okay, is it just like a completely Chinese-based index fund? Okay, all right. Cool, good for you. Yeah, it's definitely like India and China are two large emerging markets, most definitely. Good place to go. Good place to go, because they're getting bigger and bigger, and they're spending lots of money trying to fix things like we're talking about here. Building frenzies on display in places like Laocheng, which grew up as an entrepot for local wheat farmers in the North China Plain. It is now ringed by scores of 20-story towers, housing now landless farmers who have been thrust into city life. Many are giddy at their new lives. They receive their apartments free, okay, good, plus tens of thousands of dollars for their land, but others are uncertain about what they will do when the money runs out. Okay, so this is good. I was going to comment on this. So, all right, so apartments free is good. Thousands of dollars for their land. Okay, sure, good. But yes, what will they do when the money runs out? And this is fundamentally what is going to be the problem that we have here. We're still stuck in capitalism. We're still stuck in the money part. And that is what is primarily going to cause, I think, all the problems that China is going to have with this process. China is practicing colonialism in South America and Africa. Really? I had no idea. Do you have an article on that? Because that's crazy. All right, let's copy this down. Because this is an important point. Aggressive state spending is planned on new roads, hospitals, schools, community centers, which could cost upward of $600 billion a year, according to economists' estimates. In addition, vast sums will be needed to pay for the education, healthcare, and pensions of the ex-farmers. While the economic fortunes of many have improved in the mass move to cities, unemployment and other social woes have also followed the enormous dislocation. Some people feel lucky to have jobs that pay survival wages of about $150 per month. Others while away their days in pool halls and video game arcades. Now, this is kind of also where a UBI might be of use here. Top-down efforts to quickly transform entire societies have often come to grief, and urbanization has already proven one of the most wrenching changes in China's 35 years of economic transition. All right, articale. Fuck off, ad blocker. Or fuck off, paywall. Okay, we'll get to that. But we'll get to that after we get over these two articles on this China stuff. Come on, move over. Move over. There we go. All right, we got you in there. Land disputes account for thousands of protests each year, including dozens of cases in recent years in which people have set themselves aflame rather than relocate. Yikes. The country's new prime minister, Li Keqiang, indicated at his inaugural news conference in March that urbanization was one of his top priorities. He also cautioned, however, that it would require a series of accompanying legal changes to overcome various problems in the course of urbanization. Some of these problems could include chronic urban unemployment if jobs are not available, and more protests from skeptical farmers unwilling to move. Instead of creating wealth, urbanization could result in a permanent underclass in big Chinese cities and the destruction of rural, cultural, and region. Okay, so yes, so when you're doing something like this, creating massive cities and wanting to ship everyone into it, now, you have to be careful. Like these farmers. Now, okay, if they were doing this like the way we should be doing it for globally, like as a resource-based economy sort of approach, these cities should be sustainable energy, vertical farming, mass transportation, and all that sort of a thing. So the farmers could be trained to do the vertical farming and, get them trained into aspects of that. Now, when you have all these little communities in the larger cities that you move into these brand new cities, you have to make sure there's enough people to work those jobs. So you have to do the math on the skills, the human resources that you have, and where you're going to get them, how you're going to pull them in. Because otherwise, you're going to get, yes, the unemployment aspect. And, building new cities with high levels of automation and smart technology and that sort of stuff is going to be important as well. But UBI will also be a large part of it, because there's going to be people who, especially the older population, and especially people who are just farmers, are moving into a large urban area. It's going to be a culture shock, and they're going to need retraining, or they're just not going to be able to work, and you're going to have to deal with that as a part of the relocation process. The government has been pledging a comprehensive urbanization plan for more than 2 years now. It was originally to have been presented at the National People's Congress in March, but various concerns delayed that, according to people close to the government. Some of them include the challenge of financing the effort, of coordinating among the various ministries, and of balancing the rights of farmers whose land has increasingly been taken forcibly for urban projects. These worries delayed a high-level conference to formalize the plan this month. The plan has now been delayed until the fall. Government advisors say. Central leaders are said to be concerned that spending will lead to inflation and bad debt. And again, when they're doing this, making sure that the populace is ready for the move, that you have the right people going in, is going to be key to making sure that that doesn't become an issue. Such concerns may have been behind the call in a recent government report for farmers' property rights to be protected. Released in March, the report said China must guarantee farmers' property rights and interests. Land would remain owned by the state, though, so farmers would not have to have ownership rights even under the new blueprint. On the ground, however, the new wave of urbanization is well underway. Almost every province has large-scale programs to move farmers into housing towers, with the farmers' plots then given to corporations or municipalities to manage. Efforts have been made to improve the attractiveness of urban life, but the farmers caught up in the programs typically have no choice but to leave their land. Yeah, and this is a big problem, because a lot of these urban farmers, their family's been working that land for generations. So it's not just about making a change in Chinese economics and culture, but it's not just about the economics, not just about urbanization versus rural. It's about a huge cultural change, and that's something that the farmers also have to adjust to. If you get there, they're an autocratic regime, so they may not really care about. Well, obviously, they don't care about what the farmers think, but at least getting their buy-in and then selling them on it to an extent would make this a lot easier. And at least helping them figure out, well, what is their life going to be like there in this giant city, which they've never been to or even have a clue about. Giving them that transition, ability to learn how to transition, a job, and all that sort of stuff. Instead of just, oh, here's a city, thanks for your land, now go away. The broad trend began decades ago in the early 1980s. About 80% of Chinese lived in the countryside versus 47% today. And again, this is 2013. 2013. Plus an additional 17% that works in cities but is classified as rural. The idea is to speed up this process and achieve an urbanized China much faster than would occur organically. These are giant. Look at these. And if you're going to do this, you need to build tall and you need to make sure people have space. Just like a lot of these communist attempts at doing something like this, they always end up with these tiny apartments, these tiny flats, and it's not good for people's psychology. People need space. So if they're going to do this, these places need to be spacious. Primary motivation for the urbanization push is to change China's economic structure, with growth based on domestic demand for products instead of relying so much on export. In theory, new urbanites mean vast new opportunities for construction companies, public transportation, utilities, and appliance makers, and a break from the cycle of farmers consuming only what they produce. Yeah, and this is important. Like the current movements. People here talking about, even in the United States, just everyone plant gardens just to get off of capitalism, that sort of thing. And that just, I get the concept. I get why you would do that. That way you're not relying on, buying stuff from the store, but now you're just violating the specialized labor, and you're spending all your time being a subsistence farmer or whatever, and you're losing the advancements of technology, stuff like that. But yes, breaking the cycle of subsistence farming, I think, is a good thing. If half of China's population starts consuming, growth is inevitable, said Li Xiangyang, vice director of the Institute of World Economics and Politics, part of a government research institute. Right now, they are living in rural areas where they do not consume. Skeptics say the government's headlong rush to urbanize is driven by a version of modernity that has failed elsewhere. In Brazil and Mexico, urbanization was also seen as a way to bolster economic growth, but among the results were the expansion of slums and a stubborn unemployed underclass, according to experts. Right. Again, dealing with capitalism. Taking people from an area where they don't have high skills, and if you don't give them the education to get skills in this new urbanized environment, it's just not going to work well. And some people just won't want to work because they've been yanked out of the world from where they were in a rural and subsistence farming into this giant urban infrastructure. They're not going to be able to very easily adapt to it. Ultimately, you have to essentially start and make sure that you have UBI available so that people won't have to work. Otherwise, you're going to have this unemployed underclass, you're going to have slums, and you're going to have crime and stuff like that. Again, this is the issue with capitalism, because they don't have opportunities, because they don't have skills, and they don't have access to money. There's this feeling that we have to modernize, we have to urbanize, and this is our national development strategy, said Gao Yu, China country director from the Landesa Rural Development Institute, based in Seattle. Referring to the disastrous Maoist campaign to industrialize overnight, he added, "It's almost like another great leap forward. The cost of this top-down approach can be steep." In one survey by Landesa in 2011, 43% of Chinese villagers said government officials had taken or tried to take their land. This is up from 29% in a 2008 survey. In a lot of cases in China, urbanization is the process of local government driving farmers into buildings while grabbing their land. Yep. And Li Dun, a professor of public policy at Tsinghua University in Beijing. Yeah, so that's another part of that problem. The way as they talked about earlier, they went from individual ownership of land to communal ownership to individual ownership, and they needed to push a kind of a PR campaign to look at communal ownership of everything, of the land and stuff like that. I know people, especially in America, aren't going to like that because private property, blah, 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 blah. But when you talk about from the resource-based economy standpoint, that all property is common heritage to all in the country. You have to push something like that, and to help sell that on them from a values-based thing. Not that would necessarily work as well, because they already have this, generations of working on this farm that their family has owned. Getting beyond that is very difficult. Farmers are often unwilling to leave the land because of the lack of job opportunities in the new towns. Working in a factory is sometimes an option, but most jobs are far from newly built towns, and even if farmers do get jobs in factories, most lose them when they hit age 45 or 50, since employers generally want younger, nimbler workers. Yep. Again, UBI, pension, stuff like that are going to be needed. And again, figuring out which population is going to move there, what their skills are, and figuring out automatically how they're going to fit in, and even work with them how they're going to fit into this new thing, so that there's a plan. You need that transitional plan for each individual person to go into this new city, so you can plug and play and realize not everyone is going to work because of age and things like that. And you plan on pulling people from not just the rural areas, but also from other cities. Again, because there's going to be skills that obviously rural people aren't going to have. They're not going to have technology and all that sort of stuff. So you have to pull people from larger cities, pull people from the rural areas, and put them together. For old people like us, there's nothing to do anymore, said He Shifang, 45, a farmer from the city of Ankang in Shaanxi province, who was relocated from her family's farm in the mountains. Up in the mountains, we worked all the time. We had pigs and chickens. Here we just sit around and play, and people play mahjong. Giving them something to do, giving a community-focused stuff to do, like maybe a community garden, community land or something like that might help. There might not be much you can do with this, honestly. Pay them to live. Some farmers who have given up their land say that when they come back home for good around this age, they have no farm to tend and thus no income. Most are still excluded from national pension plans, putting pressure on relatives to provide. So again, UBI or lowering this pension age is going to be key. The coming urbanization plan would aim to solve this by giving farmers a permanent stream of income from the land they lost. Okay, that would be one thing. Besides a flat payout when they moved, they would receive a form of shares in their former land that would pay the equivalent of dividends over a period of decades to make sure they did not end up indigent. This has been tried experimentally with mixed results. Yeah, I can't imagine this would work very well. Honestly, you just quit this math and just do basically UBI, universal basic income, and then don't worry about it. This is just unnecessary math at all. Outside the city of Chengdu, some farmers said they received nothing when their land was taken to build a road, leading to daily confrontations with construction crews and police since the beginning of this year. Yep. But south of Chengdu, in Shanglu County, farmers who gave up their land for an experimental strawberry farm run by a county-owned company said they received an annual payment equivalent to the price of 2,000 pounds of grain, plus the chance to earn about $8 a day working on the new plantation. Okay, I don't know how good that is. I think it is okay, this deal, said Wang Zifeng, 62, a farmer in the village of Palmagang, who gave up his land to work on the plantation. It's more stable than farming your own land. Yep, the larger you go, sure. Financing the investment needed to start such projects is a central sticking point. Chinese economists say that the cost does not have to be completely borne by the government because once farmers start working in city jobs, they will start paying taxes and contributing to social welfare programs. But of course, the problem is taxes don't pay. Federal taxes, national level taxes don't pay for anything. All right, moving on. Urbanization can launch a process of value creation, said Zhang Xiangzhu, chief economist with the Agricultural Bank of China and a deputy director of the International Monetary Institute at Renmin University. It should start a huge flow of revenues. Even if this is true, the government will still need significant resources to get programs started. Currently, local governments have limited revenues and most rely on selling land to pay for expenses, an unsustainable practice in the long run. Banks are also increasingly unwilling to lend money to big infrastructure projects, Mr. Zhang said, because many banks are now listed companies and have to satisfy investors' requirements. Again, it's the problem with profit over people. Local governments are already struggling to provide benefits to local people, so why would they want to extend this to migrant workers, said Tony Miller, a Beijing-based author of a new book on urbanization in China, China's Urban Billion. It is essential for the central government to step in and provide funding for this. Exactly. It has to be done on a national scale. In theory, local governments could be allowed to issue bonds, but with no reliable system of rating or selling bonds, this is unlikely in the near term. Some localities, however, are already experimenting with programs to pay for at least the infrastructure by involving private investors or large state-owned enterprises that provide seed financing. Problems of money. Most of the costs are borne by local governments, but they rely mostly on central government transfer payments or land sales, and without their own revenue streams, they are unwilling to allow newly arrived rural residents to attend local schools or benefit from healthcare programs. This is reflected in the fact that China officially has a 53% rate of urbanization, but only about 35% of the population is in possession of an urban residency permit or hukou. This is the document that permits a person to register in local schools or qualify for local medical programs. How is this just not nationalized? I expected their healthcare and schools are just nationalized. I mean, I get being able to support them when they come in, but ultimately nationalized, register, and the money comes. The new blueprint to be unveiled this year is supposed to break this logjam by guaranteeing some central government support for such programs, according to economists who advise the government. But the exact formulas are still unclear. Granting full urban benefits to 70% of the population by 2025 would mean doubling the rate of those in urban welfare programs. Urbanization is in China's future, but China's rural population lags behind in enjoying the benefits of economic development, said Li Guang, professor of the China University of Political Science and Law. The rural population deserves the same benefits and rights as city folks enjoy. Yeah, and the issue is that they, culturally and skill-wise, they're not urban, they're rural. So just thrusting them there, it's going to make it very difficult for them to just adapt. All right, this is from 2017, so this is 4 years later. The Ghost Cities of China. All right, so here we're going to see some of the issues with this. Ghost cities is a term coined by the media. Actually, I haven't shared any of this, have I? I am so bad. All right, hold on. Let me share this one. Let me share this one. I'm so behind. My apologies. Ghost cities is a term coined by the media to refer to more than 50 cities in China which have not been inhabited after their construction. This also includes cities where the existing population is far less than the maximum housing capacity of the city. There exist numerous ghost cities in China. Some of the notable ones are Ordo City, Chang'an District, Yanhui New City, Dantu, etc. The very reason why ghost cities exist is because China has built hundreds of new cities over the last 3 decades to reshape itself into an urbanized nation, right? It plans to move approximately 250 million rural inhabitants into cities by 2026. But so far, the plan has been unsuccessful and has only increased China's ghost cities. In fact, in the past decade or so, China is said to have used more concrete than USA has used in the entire 20th century. The primary reason for the existence of ghost cities in China is the Chinese banking system. Normally, to buy anything of value on credit in China, people have to contribute a third of the value from their side. So you need a 30% down payment. This means poor people have to save for practically half their lives to buy apartments. Since most people cannot afford to buy the over-expensive Chinese accommodation, the housing loans are usually secured by people who have connections with high-ranking members of the Chinese Communist Party. Again, it's it's still about class warfare, right? Thereafter, the favored borrowers, who are mostly rich real estate builders, look for cheap land where their initial investment can double or triple. This land is usually obtained from farmers who are given a very meager compensation in return, but after the construction is complete, the apartments go uninhabited because, as mentioned before, people do not have enough money to buy the house. Again, so here we're getting the primary issues with money. Money is creating all this, right? You got rich people taking land and building stuff, and no one can afford to move in. Right, because there's a lot of people in China who don't have a whole lot of money, and definitely because of the way the banking works, that they can't afford a 30% down payment. That's just ridiculous. Can't even do that here in the United States, right? That's just insane. So that's, again, money, capitalism is what is causing this problem. Had these apartment complexes been built and then just given to the people, things would be very, very different. Once you get money in here, it always comes about profit and fuck the people. Secondly, in China, most of the houses constructed by the state or by private builders use cheap materials and are merely concrete blocks with no bathrooms, kitchens, or toilets. What fucking bullshit is that? Therefore, even after a person saves enough money to be able to buy a house, she has to spend an equal amount in making the house livable, and thus the demand for houses in China is very low. Oh, that's fucking stupid. Also, the Chinese government has mainly constructed these cities with the plan to transfer the country's rural inhabitants in the urban areas and reduce the pressure on old city centers. But the fact remains that nobody wants to stay in a city which lacks basic facilities, and people do not wish to move away from local village communities they are familiar with. Right, and okay, so we talked about this in the previous article, right? If you're going to build a city, make sure it's got all the shit you need. They need to be sustainable as much as possible from the ground up. Now, obviously, they started doing this in like 2013, right? At least from the article that we read, and this is 2017, this article. So if you're going to build cities like this, you need to make sure they are as sustainable as possible. Make sure they have sustainable energy, vertical farming, mass transportation. Make sure you got fucking apartments with goddamn toilets in them. I mean, that's a fucking no-brainer. Come on, people. Kitchens, bathrooms, toilets. That's kind of required for people to want to move in. That's, I mean, son of a bitch. This all comes down, this is done like this because of money. And the federal government, the Chinese government just funded the whole fucking thing and just said, build places where people want to move with bathrooms and kitchens and toilets and so on, and things would be different. It's a failure of capitalism, failure of money. Okay. The third reason for the existence of ghost cities is the Chinese land laws. The state owns all the land in China, and if a person is able to secure land use rights, it is mandatory for her to construct a building on that piece of land within 2 years. This, coupled with the fact that there are no property taxes in China, implies that the speculators purchase huge plots of land and undertake the construction of the buildings, hoping that these buildings will actually be occupied some years from today. Again, this is capitalism. Problems with monetary systems and investing, fuck what the people need, and all that. It's pure speculation. It's a waste of resources. It's a waste of land. Also, there's been an upsurge in the real estate sector because of a lack of other investment alternatives for the Chinese population. With the banks offering a very low interest rate and the stock markets lacking transparency, the only alternative left with the people is to invest in the real estate. They buy houses they cannot live in because these houses come under commercial housing category, which is much more expensive than the economically affordable housing that can only be used for habitation purposes. To solve China's problem, the most important step is to change the basic architectural structure of the housing complexes so as to give them a feeling of a close-knit community that attracts people from the rural areas. This also includes fewer streets in the locality, which implies lesser traffic and air pollution, and better facilities like community halls, schools, and hospitals. The central government should consider levying new property taxes, setting limits on second home speculation, and reducing its investment infrastructure. Because what the Chinese economy needs now is an increase in the aggregate demand due to an increase in people's consumption. Okay, so yeah, so this is good stuff here, right? So when they build these cities, they needed to build them from the ground up to be self-sufficient. Community halls, schools, and hospitals. And yes, like they were kind of commenting here, making small pockets of it at like individual communities. And you can even do that in large apartment complexes, right? You can make like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 levels of apartments as a small community by having school, small post office, nice common area, green spaces, right? When we talk about, large scale planning for resource-based economy, you'll be looking at doing something like this, but not fucking it up like this, right? You have giant, massive buildings where people live, and there's huge amounts of green spaces, amenities, theaters, fitness centers, common areas, all that sort of stuff, so that those 5 levels of apartments can have kind of a community, and there also be living space, workspaces, office spaces where people can work as well. You'll need to have some. So maybe it'll be like 5 levels of apartments with amenities, and then you'll have 2-3 levels of office space. That way people can work and live right where, very close by, or they can be intermingled in there. Okay, so there's that. All right, so this is from 2019. Come on, break. Damn you. It's not gonna get rid of that fucking sidebar. What China is really up to in Africa. Africa has become the fastest urbanizing region in the world, with rural migrants moving into cities, a clip that has even surpassed that of China and India. As the continent becomes one of the final frontiers of the 4th Industrial Revolution. This rapid transition presents big challenges, but also offers big rewards for countries willing to risk billions in an infrastructure building revolution unlike anything the world has seen before. No country has answered Africa's call quite like China. Okay. Yeah, Africa has definitely a lot of space to do that in. By 2050, Africa's 1.1 billion person population is slated to double, with 80% of this growth happening in cities, bringing the continent's urban headcount up to more than 1.3 billion. The population of Lagos alone is growing by 77 people per hour. According to McKinsey, by 2025, more than 100 cities in Africa will contain over 1 million people. And again, when you look at the growth rates, you can very powerfully stem this by healthcare, education, housing, sanitation. Destroying poverty, destroying inequality can help deal with that sort of a thing. It's not a population problem. It's not an overpopulation problem. It is an inequality problem. With this breakneck pace of urbanization comes many unprecedented economic opportunities. The IMF recently declared Africa the world's second fastest growing region, and many are predicting that it is well on its way to becoming a $5 trillion economy, as household consumption is expected to increase at a 3.8% yearly clip to 2.1 trillion by 2025. The attention of the world is now drifting towards Africa, with comparisons to 1990s era China are no longer coming off as radical projections. And again, let's just keep going. China has likewise become a central player in Africa's urbanization push, as a huge percentage of the continent's infrastructure initiatives are being driven by Chinese companies and are backed by Chinese funding. Okay, interesting. Right now, you could say that any big project in African cities that is higher than 3 floors or roads that are longer than 3 kilometers are most likely being built and engineered by the Chinese. It is ubiquitous, spoke Don Rugavine, the founder of More Architecture and author of many works on urbanization in China and Africa. Even before the Belt and Road was formally announced in 2013, China was making major strides into Africa's urban development sphere. When the Communist Party of China first came into power in 1949, it was virtually completely unrecognized by pretty much every other country in the world, most of whom favored the Republic of China, the former government that the Red Army chased away to Taiwan. But China began lobbying Africa extensively, getting the People's Republic recognized one country at a time. Before long, these political commitments were being repaid in concrete and steel as China started building roads, hospitals, universities, and stadiums throughout the continent. Wow. Okay. That's interesting. However, there were other reasons for China's early partnerships with Africa. Even though the colonial powers were largely gone or on the way out, the continent was still the same stockpile of natural resources it has always been, of course. And that's what the West keeps raping the whole continent for. And China wasted no time in stepping into the power vacuum, laying the political and economic inroads that have given Beijing the advanced position it has there today. China is now Africa's biggest trading partner, with Sino-Africa trade topping $200 billion a year. According to McKinsey, over 10,000 Chinese-owned firms are currently operating throughout the African continent, and the value of Chinese business there since 2005 amounts to more than $2 trillion, with $300 billion in investments currently on the table. Africa has also eclipsed Asia as the largest market for China's overseas construction contracts. To keep this momentum building, Beijing recently announced a $1 billion Belt and Road Africa Infrastructure Development Fund, and in 2018, a whopping $60 billion African aid package. So expect Africa to continue swaying to the east as economic ties with China become more numerous and robust. Wow. Interesting. As Chinese President Xi Jinping once pointed out, inadequate infrastructure is believed to be the biggest bottleneck to Africa's development. Yeah, and that's fair. That's what it really boils down to. The global north has been just destroying the Africa, Central and South America through the IMF and the World Bank through effectively economic warfare, saying, hey, if you want loans from us, then basically you're going to give your resources to America or to Europe, and you're going to get basically nothing for it. And that's part of my policies that the IMF and the World Bank need to adjust how they do their loans, instead of it being colonialism, the global north stealing the resources of Africa and Central and South America and leaving them with nothing. But these loans from the IMF and the World Bank need to be based on infrastructure. Roads, factories, healthcare, schooling, sanitation. That's what these loans should be for, because the faster we help lift these second and third world countries out of that status and into first world status, the better it is for everyone in the world. There's more money, more business, more creativity, more innovation, but there's also less poverty, less war, less suffering, and also that also reduces the rate of the population. Because as inequality goes down, as infrastructure increases, the birth rate goes down, because women have and families have access to healthcare, family planning, sanitation, and all that sort of stuff, education, all the stuff needed to be, a human being in this day and age. So this is exactly right. Infrastructure is the big bottleneck to any second and third world country. Collectively, the countries of Africa would need to spend 130 to 170 billion per year to meet their infrastructure needs, but according to the African Development Bank, they're coming up 60 to 108 billion short. Closing Africa's infrastructure gap has been the obsession of multiple waves of colonists, and China is the next in line to reach into the heart of the continent with railroads, highways, and airports. Okay, yeah. So again, my policies, I talk about reparations to Africa and to Central and South America. Basically, Europe and America, the global north, needs to start sending trillions of dollars to Africa as reparations for colonialism and imperialism, and then they can build it themselves, and that would just very powerfully elevate their economies because they're creating so much infrastructure, and then they can do all the work locally instead of having Chinese people come here and do it. Europeans built infrastructure in Africa at the turn of the century, purportedly also for local economic development, but in essence, the projects were used for natural resource extraction. Exactly. The predecessor of both the Nairobi, Mombasa, and Addis Ababa Djibouti railways can be categorized as such. Both connect inland regions with mineral deposits with major ports on the Indian Ocean. Wrote Zhao Shen Su and the Diplomat. Infrastructure is what Africa needs most, and infrastructure is what China is most equipped to provide. It is not lost on many African leaders that hardly 30 years ago, China was in a similar place that they are now, a backwater country whose economy made up hardly 2% of the global GDP. Yep. But over the past few decades, China shocked the world in the way that it used infrastructure to propel economic growth, creating a high-speed rail network that now tops 29,000 kilometers, paving over 100,000 kilometers of new expressways, constructing over 100 new airports, and building no less than 3,500 new urban areas, which include 500 economic development zones and 1,000 city-level developments. Over this period of time, China's GDP has grown more than tenfold, ranking number 2 in the world today. Yeah, and in the previous 2 articles, we kind of covered the problems with the way they're doing it, and kind of how they need to start, how they need to do it or change it so that it doesn't fuck up like that. And again, this is going to be the same thing for China, for Africa as well. They need to start building brand new cities from the ground up, sustainable energy, vertical farming, right? Schools, sanitation, education, and everything like that. Then move all these rural people in, make sure they have the training, or just not have to work through UBI or something like that. And that would make a huge, huge difference. Mass transportation, sustainability, that's the way it needs to be done. It's precisely this kind of infrastructure-induced economic growth that Africa is looking for right now. Many African leaders are looking to China to bring their experience to their countries. It's not the best experience, though. The central players in many of Africa's biggest ticket infrastructure projects, including the $12 billion coastal railway in Nigeria, the $4.5 billion Addis Ababa Djibouti Railway, and the $11 billion megaport in economic zone at Bagamoyo, are being developed via Chinese partnerships. Okay, so these are individual things. Okay, sure. Railway's good. Airport's good. Yep. And then again, what you'll find is that, again, capitalism, monetary systems will corrupt these, and only the rich will benefit from that, while the poor will just not get anything from it. Since 2011, China has been the biggest player in Africa's infrastructure boom, claiming a 40% share that continues to rise. Meanwhile, the shares of other players are falling precipitously. Europe declined from 44% to 34%, while the presence of U.S. contractors fell from 24% to 6.7%. Yeah, so this is pretty much looking at, the normal colonialist and imperialist getting the boot, getting a lot of shit for the horrors they've inflicted on it, and now Africa's moving in to fill up the power vacuum, much like this article is talking about. The Chinese SOEs are really taking over the market of infrastructure projects in Africa. It's true to say that everywhere you go in East Africa, you see Chinese construction teams. Wow, said Zhengli Huang, a research associate at the University of Sheffield, who has carried out extensive case studies on urbanization in Nairobi. The reason for this ubiquitous presence are rather straightforward, as Rugavine points out. Many African contractors simply don't have the capacity for major development projects. So if you want to do large-scale construction, you either turn to a Western firm or to a Chinese firm, but the Chinese firm is always able to undercut you on the price. Okay, so here, yeah. So he's right in that this is really about colonialism. If China really wanted to help them, instead of just reaping the benefits from doing all the work, they would be setting up schools and training the people of Africa to be able to do it themselves, so that the Chinese are not needed for it. And that's pretty much the problem. They're taking advantage of them, just like the global North has. And that's, again, money. It's all about the monies. But much like Afghanistan, right? U.S. and Afghanistan are raping the country for fun and profit, and the Chinese at least are helping. Lexi, how you doing? Welcome. They're making their profit off it, while not necessarily helping to make Africa more self-reliant. How's your weekend? How's your day? Talking China, I've read an article of 2013 and 2017 talking about the rapid urbanization of China, and then Jay Schmeshez shared this article on talking about Chinese colonialism in Africa, which is pretty crazy. I'm okay. I'm here. I'm streaming. Here's my peeps, so I'm not doing too bad. You're from Belgium? Is that right? Yeah, where are you from? Damn it! Well, cool. How you doing? Yeah, yesterday we read the articles talking about Berlin and the expropriation of property sort of thing, and Gaming Mind was here, so we got to talk about that. He's from Germany as well. I think he's from near Germany, from Berlin or something like that. So that was that's quite a thing. And from what he said, the current governor, or whatever you call them, of Berlin. This isn't a geography thing, it's just remembering where you're from. But yes, that is a thing too. That the current leader of Berlin is basically said, fuck that to the expropriation of property. I'm from the former Western Germany capital, Bonn. Okay, no clue where that is, but okay, cool. Okay, now you're gonna make me look it up. Sure, I can't even work, damn you. Map. Oh, near Cologne. Dusseldorf. In the hills. I've been to Leipzig. Okay, here's Berlin. Way the hell over here. Okay. At Leipzig, and I've been to Weimar. Okay, so you're over here. Oh, near Belgium. Luxembourg, Netherlands. Okay. All right, so that's on the other side. Cool. I'm from Wisconsin in the United States. I'm sure you can find where that is. So yeah, we're talking Africa right now. Let's see. This article's from 2019. So when we look at Africa, we see many countries chasing dreams of a better economic future while burying themselves in massive amounts of infrastructure-induced debt that they may not be able to actually afford. There have already been warning signs. The $4 Addis Ababa Djibouti Railway ended up costing Ethiopia nearly a quarter of its total 2016 budget. Nigeria had to renegotiate a deal with their Chinese contractor due to their failure to pay, and Kenya's 80% Chinese financed railway from Mombasa to Nairobi has already gone 4 times over budget, costing the country upwards of 6% of its GDP. In 2012, the IMF found that China owned 15% of Africa's external debt, and hardly 3 years later, roughly 2/3 of all new loans were coming from China. This has some analysts issuing warnings about debt traps, with some even going as far as calling what China is doing a new form of colonialism. Yeah. And again, like I said earlier, that the global north effectively needs to be throwing trillions of dollars at Africa for reparations for the colonialism and imperialism inflicted upon the country for hundreds of years, right? And then that would solve a lot of this problem. Reparations. All right, what does China get out of this? Well, it gets to call itself a colonialist with the rest of us. China needs what Africa has for long-term economic and political stability. Over a third of China's oil comes from Africa, as does 20% of the country's cotton. Africa is roughly half of the world's stock of manganese, an essential ingredient for steel production, and the Democratic Republic of Congo on its own possesses half of the planet's cobalt. Holy fuck. Africa has significant amounts of coltan, which is needed for electronics. I have not heard of that. As well as half of the world's known supply of carbonatites, a rock formation that's primarily that's the primary source of rare earths. Okay, yeah, Africa is rich in all sorts of minerals. However, there's a common misconception that all Chinese projects in Africa have the backing of Beijing. More often than not, Chinese SOEs are operating in Africa on purely for-profit ventures that don't have the ambitions of their government in mind, of course. Because capitalism. However, it can be difficult to separate China's commercial intentions in Africa from the strategic, as in many cases the two inevitably overlap, because money. The internationalization of Chinese construction firms and IT companies, as well as the building of infrastructure to better extract and export African resources, are key concerns for Beijing. So while the infrastructure being built on the ground may not necessarily be orchestrated by Beijing, it does ultimately play into China's broader geoeconomic interest. Okay, good article. I had no clue. This was super educational. So thanks for sharing that. Jay, your name. Jay Smashes. There we go. All right, there we go. Wow. All right, any questions, comments, suggestions on that? Now we're going to go into a few, got like 3 small articles here on, well, the obscenely rich and wealth tax and stuff like that. Anything? I haven't been sharing my links and updating my titles correctly today. All right. Superyacht proves we need an obscenity tax. We could raise $1 trillion for healthcare and education with 0 job losses. Yes, billionaires and millionaires should not exist. True dat. Look at this. The world's wealthiest man, most dangerous politician, is making news again with the... Okay, what this is from... Okay, let's find out when this is. This is June 4th, so this is from this year. With the announcement that he's building a $500 million boat. Little is known about Oceanico Y721 beyond the basics. It's 417 long, containing several decks. Once it's finished, it will be the world's largest 3-masted schooner. Like all good yachts, it comes with its own support yacht and helipad, right? The annual operating cost is a cool $50 million, 10%. And Bezos isn't the only one buying new boats amidst a global health crisis. Steven Spielberg recently listed his $158 million yacht while he waits for a new one from the same company that's building Jeff's. In total, there is around 50 boats longer than 328 feet currently under construction. I guess that's what happens when the world's 2,365 billionaires add $4 trillion to their net wealth during a pandemic that killed millions and financially crippled millions more. It's time for an obscenity tax. For centuries, nations have used excise taxes to curb anti-commons behavior like gambling, alcoholism, and coal production, among others. And if the weak sugar tax taught us anything, it's that we haven't pushed them nearly hard enough. California already charges 15% on plant killers like fossil fuels, on planet killers like fossil fuels. DC already charges 50% on vice products like cigarettes. New York already has a 75% premium cigar tax. Clearly prolific consumer spending is an antisocial behavior. If we lived in a real democracy, the vast majority of the human population would almost certainly vote against egregious personal expenditures such as $500 million private yachts. Though at least in the United States, we tend to believe we're temporarily embarrassed millionaires. So, no, you got so many people out there just defending millionaires and billionaires because, oh, they worked for it or whatever stupid bullshit. Probably not in this country. That said, we don't want to go to totalitarian and totally stop people from spending the way they want to spend. So why not charge the richest people on Earth 100% tax on completely unnecessary luxury goods? Okay, well that's... So double the price of it, okay. Or we can just prevent them from getting the millions and billions to begin with, and then we don't have this problem. If Zuckerberg wants to burn $12,000 on a motorized surfboard, fine. If you want to buy a $2 million puppy or pay $9,315 for a pizza, no problem. If you want to own one of the world's 2.5 million private jets, go for it. You just have to pay the new sales tax. Okay, so effectively just doubles the price of it. Okay. But again, I'd rather them not exist in the first place. But he earned it! 2.5 million private jets sounds really high. Oh yes, man, how you doing? Welcome, welcome. Oh, I don't think so. I mean, how many... I think they must count any small player. Oh, that could be. But yeah, it depends on how they classify that, right? If it's a, do they or do they not count props? That's about 1 per 2,000 people. Well, businesses will have multiple ones or 3,000. Yeah, they might be counting prop jets as well instead of just jet-powered jets. I don't know. Well, let's check. Let's check. Let us check. What do they say? Hello? Does it say? Okay, it doesn't say here. It could be. You never know how they count these things. But he earned it. Apologists are quickly to suggest that billionaires really do earn their 10-digit net worth, a mathematically impossible feat made manifest only off the backs of untold millions of workers, menace economics, and usually a hefty dose of monopolization or financialization, and that all taxation is theft. That's like, what's the top 0.1% net worth worldwide? Like, what does the 0.1%? Okay, yeah, okay. What does an individual have to be in the top 0.1%? Okay, let's look at that. $2.4 million in 2017. Top 1%. Yeah, 1.6 million here. In the sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. 1%, yeah. It's based off tax filings, which doesn't exactly work. So yeah, it says probably 1 to 2 million. Yeah, it's interesting where they get the numbers and what that really means. For top 1%, or 0.1%, yeah, I think it should be probably a little higher too. I mean, like, because, God, Bezos and stuff, they've got billions, right? I mean, that's obviously, order of magnitude higher than everyone else, but, 10, yeah, like I said, 5 to 10 million is probably a good number for the top 0.1%. Yeah. You know people well in the top 1%. Okay, cool. They don't have a private plane? Not in a long way. Okay, yeah, it might just be that these are, obviously some of the really rich people do have their own, like Trump, but it might just be that they can afford to charter it, perhaps? Yeah, I'm not sure. Not sure. Some even dopely argue that everything in modern life is a luxury. iPhones, cars, wine, etc. And that's true, but any reasonable person can accept that there are obviously levels of spending that are simply unacceptable while others suffer. Democracy should decide. It's ironic to think that direct democracy is the only real form of truly free market capitalism. There must be an extremely scary thought for all the faux free marketers who are actually just thinly disguised corporatists. How much an obscenity tax could raise? Well, that might be possible, but even chartering a plane is kind of iffy with a private plane. Why do you say it's iffy? And some of the businesses have their own private jets as well. Like, it's not really a private plane. Oh, I see. Okay, all right, that's fair. Well, what they might be meaning by private is not owned by the big airports. and also perhaps the size, or not owned by the big air companies, and also by the size. 5 to 10 people on an expensive plane versus, yeah. We're splitting hairs trying to figure it out, and we don't have the data. All right. Potential income from taxing the obscene purchases of the ultra elite is absolutely enormous. Private aviation is expected to grow $39.84 billion by 2025. The fine art market, money laundering scheme. Yep, think Christie's Sotheby's is already $64 billion annual scam. In Alaska. Yep. Where they have a lot of land and not a whole lot of ways of getting through it. The global luxury good market, think LVMH, Rolex, etc., is expected to reach $296.9 billion by 2026. Elites are forecasted to spend $4.5 trillion on luxury real estate by 2027. When you add in obscenity taxes on doomsday bunkers, private islands, and pet cheetahs, our global community could reallocate trillions towards real necessities that could improve the lives of everyone on Earth. How we could spend it. Taking back just $1 trillion from the world's greatest extractors could be spent on things that would vastly improve the health and future of our planet and our people. Medicare to 200 million people, 10 million students to university for 4 years, 10 million houses with solar for 50 years. And remember, that's we can do this every single year. 1 trillion might seem like a lot, but remember, the rich can't afford it. Fortune 500 companies are currently avoiding up to $767 billion in income taxes each year. Panama Papers. Rich families are already costing us $280 billion in lost taxation each year. The top 0.000003% are currently sitting on $12.39 trillion, and the richest families have $32 trillion stashed in offshore tax havens. Yeah, and then also, right, the rich are the ones who are primarily responsible, at least on an individual level, for a lot of the pollution and waste in the world. Income and corporate tax rates for the top 1% have been falling for decades and will continue to trend in that direction. Introducing an obscenity tax might be the only way to bring some sense of equality back into our global family. Sure, obscenity tax would be a way, but I would rather just get rid of millionaires and billionaires altogether. Get a wealth tax, get a maximum wage, and go from there. In conclusion, remember, this isn't a proposal to tax any source of income that might be used to reinvest in active assets that nominally create jobs. Right-wingers can make no claim that this tax would be stealing from the productive economy. This is literally just a tax on outrageous personal spending. The beauty is that unlike income taxes and corporate taxes, which are easily evaded by the elites, sales taxes are taken at the source. Worst case scenario, the mega rich stop wasting so much money on unnecessary luxury purposes. I subscribe to a radical notion that the real needs of our global family are far greater priority than the flaunting excesses of the elite. Because what's more important, the health, safety, education, economic security, and ecological sustainability of the next generation, or the purses, paintings, and super yachts of the sociopaths who clearly don't care if the rest of us suffer and die? We need to care less about Jeff's boat and more about our brothers and sisters who can barely keep their heads above water. Okay, interesting. I hadn't really considered a tax like this yet. Interesting. So this is from 2019. I'm pretty sure this is Thomas Piketty who we're talking about here. Billionaires hurt economic growth and should be taxed out of existence, says best-selling French economist. Yep, this is Thomas Piketty. I have his book, but I haven't read it. I bought it way back then. Popular French economist says billionaires are harmful to economic growth and would be effectively abolished under his tax plan, according to an interview. Thomas Piketty, whose 2013 book on inequality Capital in the 21st Century became a global bestseller and a Bible for tax-the-rich progressives. Just published a 1,200-page follow-up book called Capital and Ideology. Wow. It won't be published in English until March, but in an interview with the French magazine Forbes, Piketty called for a graduated wealth tax of 5% on those worth 2 million euros or more, and up to 90% on those worth more than 2 billion euros. Okay, so this is cool. I mean, it's not 100%, which is exactly what we need, but it's a start. Again, this is way too high. I mean, it's not. For me, my maximum wage is $675,000. So if you're getting to 90% before $1 million, if you're not getting to 90% marginal tax rate by $1 million, you're really not even trying. Entrepreneurs will have millions or tens of millions, he said, but beyond that, those who have hundreds of millions or billions will have to share with shareholders, who could be employees. So no, there won't be billionaires anymore. How can we justify that their existence is necessary for the common good? Contrary to what is often said, their enrichment was obtained thanks to these collective goods, which are the public knowledge, the infrastructure, the laboratories of research. Okay, yeah, this is kind of what I talk about. People ask me, well, no one will have any drive to do anything if they can't be a billionaire. I mean, where's that money going to go? Just like he's saying here, the money will instead go into the business and go into, where's it go? You share it with the shareholders, or giving stock to the employees. Yeah, right here. This is a big part of what might happen with high taxes like that. Piketty added that the notion that billionaires create jobs and boost growth is false. He said per capita income growth was 2.2% a year in the U.S. between 1950 and 1990, but when the number of billionaires exploded in the 1990s and 2000s, growing from 100 in 1990 to around 600 today, per capita income growth fell to 1.1%. So it halved. We cannot spend our time denouncing populism while relying on fake news as rude, Piketty said. While Piketty's plans have been popular in academia and the far left, none of his plans have been implemented by politicians. Even France abolished its wealth tax in 2017, saying it just discouraged investment. Piketty said he has gained hope from the presidential campaigns of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Fuck this snake. Warren has proposed a 2% wealth tax on those worth $50 million or more, while Sanders has proposed boosting estate taxes. You need to do both here, and I do that in my stuff. Yeah, again, my progressive taxation is much higher than this. Things are starting to move. Piketty told the magazine Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and the young elected Democrats are resuming the theme of redistribution. Avoiding the label socialist, Piketty said that the type of free market capitalism that has dominated the U.S. since Ronald Reagan needs to be reformed. Reaganism has begun to justify any concentration of wealth as if the billionaires were our saviors, he said. Reaganism has shown its limits. Growth has been halved, inequalities have doubled. It's time to break out of this phase of sacredness of property to overcome capitalism. All right, there you go. So this is... He's got a 1,200-page follow-up book. God, I wish I had time. Wish I had the time to read this. All right, so he says a graduated wealth tax of 5% on those with 2 million euros, and up to 90% of those worth. Okay, so this is a good start. A nice progressive income tax, or wealth tax, progressive wealth tax. And I don't know if I added that recently. So I had a single wealth tax, like a 8%. Yeah, so I the marginal tax rate of 8%. Maybe I'm gonna have to change this. Yeah, I think I'll change this to a progressive tax rate. Progressive net wealth tax starting at 8%, going up to 100%. Yeah. All right, there is that. I don't know quite where I'm going to put those numbers, but I'm going to have to take a look at that. And it's not going to be perfect because that's, yeah, it'll be 100%. I don't know if I'll start at 75,000 or if I'll go start at 250,000 and then go to something. I don't know. All right, this is from, okay, this is the first article we read today that is from this year. The secret to actually taxing the rich. This is, my God, how is, can't even see it. I tried to, typically if you expand it enough, the fluid styling will get rid of this fucking sidebar, but this is not doing it. Imagine what programs we could fund, how many people we could help if the IRS was able to recoup that $163 billion that the top 1% shorts the government every year. Fully funding the IRS should be a no-brainer. This is from Robert Reich. So, yeah, what I say is get rid of the CIA or other things like that and send them all over to the to the IRS. Taxing the rich doesn't just entail closing tax loopholes and instituting a new wealth tax. It also means ensuring that they pay what they owe in the first place, and that means boosting the Internal Revenue Service's funding. The richest 1% of Americans evade $163 billion every year in taxes. How do they get away with it? Panama Papers. Because the IRS doesn't have the tools and resources available to audit these wealthy tax cheats. Yep, and there's even a quote by someone from the IRS that specifically said they don't do rich people or corporations because they don't have the resources to do it. Over the past 10 years, the IRS budget has been reduced by roughly 20%. And as of last year, the IRS had 9,510 auditors, down a third from 2010. The last time the IRS had fewer than 10,000 revenue agents was 1953, when the economy was a seventh of its current size. The result, billionaires in 2018 were about 80% less likely to be audited than they were in 2011, and now the poorest taxpayers are audited at about the same rate as the top 1%. Pandora Papers, yes, someone mentioned that on Facebook. I don't remember what it's about, though. Oh, same people as Panama Papers. Oh, interesting. Bigger than Panama. Fuck off. Another global scandal, same like Panama Papers, is set to unfold as the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists will release Pandora Papers tomorrow, so it'll be Sunday. So yep, this will be tomorrow. Tomorrow. According to the details garnered, another Panama Papers-style global scandal is set to be surfaced. The International Consortium of Investigative Journalists will release 11.9 million documents on Sunday night. This global investigation will surpass even the Panama Papers of 2016, as many as 600 journalists and 150 media organizations from 117 countries have participated in this investigation. I bet you ProPublica will pick this up and will go nuts with it. In 2017... Okay, blah, blah. Okay, good to know. So I guess tomorrow is going to be a busy day for news, I think. Good to know. Good to know. Thanks for bringing it up. So I guess that's what I'll be covering on Tuesday then. There should be plenty of news out about that on Monday. Okay, let's see. So the result, Billionaires in the 2018 were about 80% less likely to be audited than they were in 2011, and now the poorest taxpayers are audited at about the same rate as the top 1%. When asked by Congress, why is this? The IRS said that auditing poor taxpayers is a lot easier because it's done by relatively low-level employees. These audits are the most efficient use of available IRS examination resources. Beefing up IRS enforcement is a critical part of cracking down on wealthy tax cheats and ensuring the super rich pay their fair share. Every $1 invested in the IRS budget produces $4 in revenue from the top people, the richest people. Imagine what programs we could fund, how many people we could help if the IRS is able to recoup that $163 billion that the top 1% shorts the government every year. Fully funding the IRS should be no brainer. Yeah, making the taxes more a hell of a lot more simple and easy to understand, and a lot less, and get rid of the tax loopholes, progressive tax rates on wealth and everything, and funding the IRS definitely. And I'm pretty sure I have that in here too. You have to add. Yeah, greatly increase. Yeah, here we go. IRS admits it doesn't audit. Yep, there you go. So it's a 4-to-1 in revenue. Oh, fucking balls. There we go. Okay, we got it. All right. So these are all the articles that I had prepared for today. And these are some of the ones that I've had from last week that we can cover. Now we're going to get into the climate change stuff. The yummy, we're all going to die sort of doomer stuff that we do here. Questions, comments, suggestions about the wealth tax and that sort of a thing? Might have to take a look at what they post and what they talked about in here and adjust my policies. The excess tax sounds interesting. Sounds very interesting. Ugh. All right, the apocalypse will not be slow. All of us are in a new world, and we'd better get used to it. This is from August. Another one from this year. Whee! Now we all know how I talk about climate change, and you know, my daughter, she's 12, right? So she's the one. She's going to be living through this, and by 2100, like currently we're on step for the worst case scenario for climate change, which is RCP 8.5, which is approximately a 4.6 degree increase by 2100. Now, I have been saying within the next 200 to 300 years, there's basically almost no life left on this planet. And I'm definitely going to bring it down more towards the 200 year mark, because this next year that, you know, my daughter is going to probably live to see 2100 if she's not murdered by refugees and people needing food and her needing food and water and all that sort of stuff, that all the horrors that are going to be happening here. She's going to see some of the greatest horrors humanity has ever seen as the temperature gets higher and higher, as climate change does its thing. I mean, you've got, what was it? Oh yeah, Turkey. Yeah, we read on Thursday, Turkey's running out of water, and that's happening in a lot of places. Highest temperatures that our world has ever seen, making it unable for people to live, which is another reason why we need to take our start going underground so that the cooling is more efficient. So, you know, just having houses that are underground, just covered with ground, has a much higher efficiency of insulation, so you don't have to worry about air conditioning so much. Then you can even also use a sort of cooling that's based on temperature exchange between your house and what's under the ground, because just immediately under the ground it's a lot cooler. If you go down far enough, you can get like 50 degrees. So 50 degrees, pumping air down there, then into your house. That could be much better than the air conditioning that we're using today. All right, so the apocalypse will not be slow. It's already picking up speed. Admittedly, I hadn't been there for 46 years, but old friends of mine, still alive, or at least lived, in the town of Greenville, California, and now, well, it's more or less gone, though they survived. The Dixie Fire, one of those devastating West Coast blazes, had already blackened 504 square miles of Northern California in what was still essentially the old pre-fire season. It would soon become the second largest wildfire in the state's history. When it swept through Greenville, much of downtown, along with more than 100 homes, were left in ashes as the 1,000 residents of that Gold Rush era town fled. I remember Greenville as a wonderful little place that, all these years later, still brings back fond memories. I'm now on the other coast, but much of that small historic community is no longer there. This season, California's wildfires have already devastated 3 times the territory burned at the same period. It burned in the same period in 2020's record fire season. And that makes a point that could be more salient to our moment and our future. A heating planet is a danger, not in some distant time, but right now, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Don't just ask the inhabitants of Greenville, ask those in the village of Montlake, British Columbia, the second town in that Canadian province to be gutted by flames in recent months. In a region that normally, or perhaps should I say, once upon a time, was used to neither extreme heat or drought nor the fires that accompany them. In case you hadn't noticed, we're no longer just reading about the climate crisis. We're living it in a startling fashion. At least for this old guy, that's now a fact. Not just of life, but of all our lives. That simply couldn't be more extreme, and I don't even need the latest harrowing report of the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change to tell me so. Whether you've been sweating or swearing under the latest heat dome, fleeing fires somewhere in the west, broiling in a Siberia that's releasing startling amounts of heat-producing methane into the atmosphere, being swept away by floodwaters in Germany, sweltering in unprecedented heat in fire season in Greece, where even the suburbs of Athens were being evacuated, baking in Turkey, or on the island of Sardinia in a disaster without precedent, neck deep in water in a Chinese subway car, or after extreme rains, wading through the subway systems of New York City or London. All of us are in a new world, and we'd better damn well get used to it. Yeah, this is exactly right. Climate change is here, and it's not fucking around. And like I said on Twitter, and I got a little bit of pushback on this. Ultimately, if Congress is not starting with, if the bills that Congress does not put through for infrastructure and climate change is not $10 trillion or more, they're basically voting for human extinction. And that's the way it should be, relatively globally, right? Every economy is going to be a little different, so that number is going to be different. But if you're not spending trillions of dollars on saving humanity from extinction, you are voting for human extinction. And that's exactly what the United States is doing and many other countries are doing. Floods, mega drought, the fiercest of forest fires, unprecedented storms, you name it, and it seems to be happening not in 2100 or 2031, but now. A recent study suggests that in 2020, not 2040 or 2080, more than a quarter of Americans had suffered in some fashion from the effects of extreme heat. Already the greatest weather-based killer of Americans, and given this blazing summer, 2021 is only likely to be worse. By the way, don't imagine it's just we humans who are suffering. Consider, for instance, the estimated billions or more, yes, 1 billion mussels, barnacles, and other small sea creatures. They're estimated to have died off the coast of Vancouver, Canada, during the unprecedented heat wave there earlier this summer. Yeah, and I think we covered that. There's mussels are dying. The acidity in the ocean is getting high enough to dissolve the crabs, the shell of crabs. We've got wheat being baked by the sun and only giving half the yield. We've got like berries and stuff being cooked right on the vines, being useless. We've got birds and stuff just dying because of the heat. And there's an article that said that there are 23 species that just went extinct. This shit's accelerating, and it's not going to get better. And that level of extinction is going to get higher and higher every year until 2100. There isn't going to be a whole lot left of humanity. Most everything's going to be on fire. It's going to be horrible. By 2200, there probably won't be much life left on this planet. A few weeks ago, watching the setting sun in eerie blaze of orange-red in a hazy sky here on the East Coast was an unsettling experience once I realized what I was actually seeing. A haze of smoke from the mega drought-stricken West's disastrous early fire season. It had blown thousands of miles east for the second year in a row, managing to turn the air of New York and Philadelphia into danger zones. Oh my God. In a way, right now, it hardly matters where you look on this planet of ours. Take Greenland, where a massive melting event occurring after the temperature there hit double the normal this summer made enough ice vanish in a single day last week to cover the whole of Florida in 2 inches of water. But there was also that record brush fire torching more than 62 square miles of Hawaii's Big Island. And while you're at it, you can skip prime houseboat vacation season at Lake Powell on the Arizona-Utah border, since that huge reservoir is now 3/4 empty and among Western reservoirs anything but alone. It almost doesn't matter which recent report you cite when it comes to what the scientists are finding. It's invariably worse than you or even they had previously imagined. It's true, for instance, of the Amazon rainforest, one of the great carbon sinks on the planet. Parts of it are now starting to release carbon into the atmosphere, as a study in the journal Nature reported recently, partially thanks to climate change and partially to the more direct forms of human intervention. It's no less true of the Siberian permafrost in a region where, for the first time above the Arctic Circle, the temperature in one town reached more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit on a summer day in 2020. And yes, when Siberia heats up in such a fashion, methane, a far more powerful heat-trapping gas than CO2, is released into the atmosphere from that region's melting permafrost wetlands, which had previously sealed it in. And recently, that's not even the real news. What about the possibility, according to a new study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, that what's being released now is actually a potential methane bomb, not from the permafrost itself, but from thawing rock formations within it. In fact, when it comes to the climate crisis, as a recent study in the journal Bioscience found, some 16 out of 31 tracked planetary vital signs, including greenhouse gas concentrations, ocean heat content, and ice mass, set worrying new records. Similarly, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide have all set new year-to-date records for atmospheric concentrations about 2020 and 21. Maxery man, how you doing? Hey dude, don't at me, I don't care. How you doing? Welcome. Just doing this amazing article on how we're all going to fucking die due to climate change. Doomerism, it's what we do. The viewer from Italy. No? Is that you? Elias was here. Elias, who was it? No. I do not remember the Italy person. Italy sounds familiar. Who is it? Oh my God. Yes, Lexi. I didn't remember where he's from. Oh, you saw him in another stream? Oh, okay. Cool. Oh, okay. Hi. Thanks for the hi. Appreciate that. Appreciate that so very much. Yeah, we're doing our climate doomerism. This is a good article, just really going over just all the different ways that all the evidence that climate change is here, and it's going to just get worse and faster. It says the apocalypse will not be slow. And yeah. And this is, it's unsettling because my daughter is gonna have to live through this. I'll be dead 50, so yeah, the next 30 years or so. What do I say about prison reform? I think our system is purely based on punishment, yep, and not resocialization, yep, which makes our nation incredibly more dangerous. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And basically I say let's follow the Nordic model and go that way. There's lots of great videos on that sort of thing, and you're right. It's basically putting people, it's about punishment and not reform, and that's highly problematic. And that's not all. I mean, we definitely need to reform our prison system, but we also need minimum wage increases. That's huge. Healthcare, housing is a human right, and things of that nature too that help. You know, one of the prime indicators of the rates of incarceration is the level of inequality. If you read the two books from my policies, the spirit level and the inner level, they specifically show that inequality is a direct indicator of how the rates of incarceration are. Also includes punishment. I'm totally against any form of punishment. I want them to get psychological help. I haven't seen that so much. From what I've seen, I watched a video for like last week or two. Basically, there's this one guy, he was in prison for, I don't know, 20 years, 10 years. Well, he was in, quote, prison for 10 years, and he was out getting education. He was out and about working a job, right? And getting education and preparing for his time after he got out of, quote, prison. Right. I mean, there has to be some level of punishment to it. Otherwise, you know, actually for them, what the punishment is the base social isolation, when they are taken from, you know, the city, taken from their town and family and put into, you know, their nice like dormitory, their quote prison dormitory, where they have access to, you know, computers and PlayStations and food and stuff like that, and can go and can come. Right, it's not. It's pretty amazing. To me, there are no per se bad humans. All humans are good in nature. Yet society just reshaped them to do things. Yep, society is responsible. Yes, no, you're exactly right, and that's not possible under capitalism. People are products of their environment. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree, but yeah, it's hard to do that. Hard to not do that while we are under capitalism, because capitalism creates broken people. We are all, every single one of us are fucked in the brain because of capitalism, because of the tension within methods of exchange, the competitiveness, the exploitation, right? Until we get beyond capitalism, till we get to a, you know, resource-based economy or something like that, it's there's going to be people who are going to do things wrong, and we're going to need to deal with it. And currently, prison is prison of sorts is going to be the way to do it. The best way to keep people from being put in jail is to fix our society. Increase minimum wage, universal health care, universal housing, mass transportation, right? You know, all these sorts of stuff that we talk about here for policies. That is what will help do it. Well, wealth taxes are needed for this, because if you do not tackle inequality, you won't tackle the issues with crime and stuff like that. So wealth tax, income tax, minimum wage, higher minimum wage, low maximum wage, wealth taxes, right? If you do not tackle inequality, then we're not really going to be dealing with the crime problem. The countries that have the lowest level of you know, crime and problems are those that have the lowest levels of inequality. And, you know, that's, if you don't want prisoners, we need to stop, as you're saying, the conditions that make people do crime. And that's all the sort of policies that I'm talking about in my policies and what we talk about here. So I agree. I'd rather have a world where prisoners are not a thing, where crime isn't a thing. That world is a long, far way from where we are today. And honestly, we're never going to get to that. Not that I'm a complete doomer here, because I am. So one right-winger tried to kill my arguments, bring up pedos. He indicated in my world that they would be left doing what they do. You know, saying no prison doesn't mean we shouldn't follow. Right, but in case. Right, exactly right. And I haven't really studied that issue so much, pedophilia. I don't know. I haven't studied it. I have some sort of inkling that it has an evolutionary base that's kind of broken, or it may be a direct, maybe a biopsychosocial result of capitalism and patriarchy, right? It's just a toxic, completely broken form of patriarchy in an individual that leads to that sort of a thing. But I don't know. I haven't studied it enough. But you're right. Tagging them and making sure that they are just not in places where children are, right? I don't know how to reform people that are quite like that. Prison industry people are interested in having as much prison as possible. Start. Yeah. Well, as long as it's well, there's two parts to this, right? As long as there's prison privatization, that is exactly right. So that's why we need to get rid of private prisons. But also the fact that the government serves the corporations and the rich. Until we get rid of that, also, the prison industry will still be an industry. The government has to, as much as possible, serve the people and not the 1%. I mean, the police serve the 1%. They don't protect and serve the people. They protect and serve the property and the will of the 1%. This is, again, it's an inequality problem. Even state-run prisons all have a form of prison labor. Right, here in the United States, you're right. You're exactly right. And again, that is a symptom of inequality, and that's why we need to get rid of that. That's a part of that, prison reform where we're shifting to the Nordic model as much as possible. I mean, I'm sure there's ways to improve from there, but ultimately, if you're not tackling inequality, to deal with prison reform, you have to tackle inequality. Much like I talk my policies, if you can't, all issues are interdependent. So if you want to fix the prison problem, you can shift to the Nordic style. But ultimately, there's still going to be a lot of people in prison because of the high level of inequality and poverty. Even the fact that we are an imperialist and colonial power increases the level of crime because of the fact that increases racism and that increases division. So we really have to work on fixing the entirety of our country from the level of inequality in every single possible way in order to help reduce the amount of prisons. And again, the hard labor sort of thing is one of those things that we need to get rid of as well. The current prison system here in the United States is slave labor. Oh, yeah. My advice is this. Don't be disappointed. You just need to understand that AOC approved. Yeah, I know. I saw that too. Oh my God. You just have to realize the Democratic Party they're not progressive. They are moderate conservatives. So you should expect the horrors coming from them because that's what they do. I mean, I write about it right in my post over here. No, not over here, over here. About lesser of two evils voting, stuff like that. Yeah, the AOC thing, AOC approving the funding for, yeah, that is, I'm really disappointed in that as well. Regardless of what she's going to say. And she said that ultimately it has something to do, something to do with internal politics with the Democratic Party. I think it's more something like that. If she doesn't approve this, then they're going to primary her or get rid of her district or something like that, which is, Democrats are definitely going to do to progressives as much as they can. So-called squad is just a Trojan horse of big business. It could be. I know there's a lot of that going around. I'm torn on that whole thing, especially with AOC. My post kind of goes into it here that I just shared, talking about that. I don't know. I want to be hopeful. But AOC specifically has helped to kick me in the junk as far as that's concerned. I mean, anyone who calls Pelosi Mama Bear is one with the Borg, right? I mean, she is a massive part of the corruption, a corporate whore of the highest order who needs to get the fuck out. Harass needs to be primaried. Manchin needs to be primaried. Cinema needs to be primaried. I mean, all these old fucks who are totally... Oh, you see, she wears a $5,000 outfit saying tax search. Yeah, no, I talked about that. And that's another one of those things that I've been I'm torn on that. And the dress, yeah, the interesting thing about that is the dress is from an immigrant, but the immigrant was from Canada, and she is married to an heir of the Seagram's family. So it wasn't as it wasn't potentially as good as it could have been. And as I talked about that whole thing too, that, you know, if she was there and there was a protest that was outside as well that she was working with, I would have less issue with it, I guess. Such event, a real progressive would distance itself from Hollywood. Sure. I understand that argument as well. And my preference would be for her to be outside at a tax the rich protest for that whole thing. That would have been what she should have done. Going inside, yeah, like you're talking about, and just trolling them with the dress. I get the use of it, kind of, but it has less use than being outside and lending your support to a protest that's going outside. Now, there was a protest that was going on outside. It was a form of BLM protest that eventually went somewhere else following, you know, something happened and they went somewhere else with their protest. I think it's because the police were arresting people and taking them away. I think they went to the police station after that. But yeah, I get your issues there. I'm that whole thing made me conflicted. He pisses me off. I don't really watch. I really don't watch him. I haven't. He's been interesting. He started the force the vote thing, which I support. But I don't watch him normally. He's interesting. He's interesting. He's pretty radical. What's he saying on vaccination? I'm assuming he's pro-mandatory vax. He's against the mandate. I'm torn on the mandate. Again, forcing everyone to get vaccinated. I mean, having everyone vaccinated. Okay, so I don't know what his stance is. Here's the issue. The real problem we have here is the fact that we have to have this conversation. The fact that society has failed our people to the point where we have this conversation about whether or not to get vaccinated. That is the real story. How did our society, our culture, our country get to the point where this is a fucking conversation, right? Now, inequality, poverty, especially amongst people of color. Oh, sure. No, I get that. I get that. I got vaccinated. My family's vaccinated. That's not the. But there's also scientists saying don't wear a mask. There's scientists saying that there's doctors and scientists saying a lot of things, right? That the righties are clinging to. There was a Journal of a JAMA report that said masks cause harm, right? Just because quote science said it doesn't mean that it's right, because there's a bunch of right-wing fuckers who are saying stupid shit, and there are people who are just doing science, right? So it's not that is also part of that problem, right? That consensus, depending on where you get your news from, isn't the same, you know, for the audience that we're talking about. Then we've got people of color who have been experimented on for decades and decades, like fucking guinea pigs. So, you know, people of color are suffering from dealing that and don't really trust the vaccine or science because of the harm inflicted upon them. Right? And the fact that the pharmaceutical industry is privatized and they only care about their profit, right? Well, things like COVID and climate change we speak about, right? Yeah, no, I agree. But that's not what everyone believes or understands, and that's, you know, kind of the problem. The corruption of corporations within medicine, within healthcare, within vaccine creation, the vaccine court, and the experimentation of, you know, people of color and people not having access to healthcare. I mean, just all these things point into why we have this conversation, because we don't have inequality, because we have colonialism, because we have all these things. In Cuba, a nation I love, they have mandatory vaccination, and it doesn't strike me as big pharma. Oh, right, because they have socialized medicine. Right? That hence is the difference. They trust their healthcare because it's socialized, and so is their pharmaceutical industry, right? But here, all of our stuff is privatized. You're kind of proving my point here. Right? So if we had socialized, in my policy, I'd say nationalize healthcare, nationalize the pharmaceutical industry, especially vaccine creation, and that would stop a lot of this. Yeah, Cuba's done some good stuff. Good stuff as far as that's concerned. They've been a fairly decent global leader when it comes to that, sending their doctors out to Italy and stuff like that to help. To me, if we got to go on with society, we need to get the vaccine. Yep, we need to see right-wingers are against it. Yep, but they are. Well, of course, but because that's the very nature of conservatism, right? Conservative psychology at its core is fear-based. So of course they're going to be. And again, with my post talking about lesser of two evils voting, right? Once you can get someone triggered emotionally, their brain turns off. And negative advertising, negative words saying they're the enemy, this is the problem, is very easy for people who are conservative, right? Because it triggers their fear base. Once you trigger their fear, their brain turns off, and then you're pretty much fucked. So one of the core issues that we need to do is to help prevent conservatism from even being a thing. Again, that comes down to it all comes down to inequality. Make sure people have healthcare, make sure people are heavily educated, housing, mass transportation, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, nationalize healthcare, nationalize the pharmaceutical industry, right? It's really a discussion about how our country has failed on pretty much every single level, which is why we're having this problem. So you're against mandatory vaccine with all the problems we have. Well, I'm not against it. I'm conflicted, as I'm saying. I think everyone should be vaccinated, right? I most definitely do, but making it mandatory with the outcry that there is highly problematic. What the real question is how do we create the social and cultural changes and educational changes in society so as to make this not a question? Like, a lot of countries put out PSAs, right? You have your scientists out there speaking. I've got PSAs going on all the time. You've got songs about it. You've got your president out there doing it. Now take a look at like what New Zealand did, right? New Zealand, I haven't read anything on them recently, but the prime minister was out there every week talking about it, talking about the vaccine, talking about the vaccine, talking about COVID, right? And they didn't have Trump in power, who was saying it was a hoax, right? Trump was a huge part of this problem. Disabling, he got rid of the pandemic response unit. He said it was a hoax and all that sort of stuff. I think the problem is that we allow to have conspiracy nuts like Joe Rogan and others have multi-million-dollar contracts, so to speak. Take that a step further. The big problem is that we have a society in which someone like Joe Rogan exists, like someone who is anti-science or maybe against the vaccine, right? The fact that he's somewhat conservative is the fundamental problem. In case where people openly speak out against vaccines, they should be banned. No, because that is not freedom of speech. If you're gonna have freedom of speech, it has to be from freedom of speech for everyone, even people you don't agree with. I know you don't like it. I don't like it. But that's ultimately, that's the way it has to be. It just, to take a step back further, well, how did conservatives become a thing? And how do we prevent conservatism from being a thing? How do we prevent exploitation from being a thing, which honestly creates a lot of this problem? The fact that, pharmaceutical industry is for profit and so on. Freedom of speech is limited to when it comes to anti-science stances, just like racism. Okay, I believe that. I get that. I get that. I get that. There may be some limit to that at some point, but I don't know what that is. That's not something I've given a lot of thought about, but ultimately it's going to come down to a free speech issue unless there are other mitigating circumstances, which here there might be. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. All right. Max Fritz, good to see you, man. Really good to see you. And lots of good questions and thoughts here. I do have to get going. It is 5 o'clock. And it is time for me to get going for the wife gets home. Total freedom of speech is a libertarian position. Okay, yep, fair. I don't think it's cool to allow KKK to broadcast, but in Europe, it would be banned. I don't know if it's all of Europe, but definitely probably in Germany, right? So I know they're explicitly very much, they have a law against the Nazi sort of stuff. Yeah, man, thanks so much for your for gifting me with your time. I really do appreciate it. Have a great weekend. If you have any other last minute comments before we call this a day, go and pop it in here. Yeah, freedom of speech is a tricky one. It's a very tricky one. Where do you strike that balance? All right. Freedom for all proletarians on planet unite. There we go. Solidarity. I get behind that. All right, everyone. Have a great weekend. Stay safe and COVID free, and we'll see you guys next week.
Just me and you, let's make up all the rules. Count to 10 and watch the stars turn blue. Watch the stars.